All right, well, for this week's episode of DevLog, I have two exciting guests. Go ahead and introduce yourselves. Brian, you can go first.
Hello there. I'm Brian. I typically go by Pelt or Beans or a variety of different nicknames, but I am Eric and Andy's youngest brother.
Taller than both of us, but youngest,
Yeah. Yeah.
which is
Yeah.
unfortunate for me and Eric, but it's yeah, that's how it goes.
Yeah. Andrew and I are the same height, being twins, but yes, the young pelt has indeed surpassed us in height. And I'm
Somehow.
Eric, and you might have seen me in some other episodes, I think, depending on when Andy uploads these. But and I'm the twin brother based in Bangkok, Thailand.
Actually, actually, Eric, this is your debut. This is your debut episode,
Oh,
so
hello
everyone
everyone.
get a good
Hello
look.
community.
Yeah.
Yes,
So
hear the voice halfway across the world, at least from where Andrew and Pelt are.
and And so basically the main idea behind this video is to spend some time because I think we have an interesting experience being three brothers coming together to create a small indie game studio. Um, and I feel like we've had a really awesome experience. And so I thought it might be kind of fun for us to share different things that we feel like we've learned that have made the experience successful. And so if you're thinking about starting a small team, you might be able to learn a thing or two, or maybe you're already doing these things, or maybe you do things differently. Like that's totally fine. But this is just kind of a chance for us to kind of share our experiences. So we each have a topic. So I'll start with mine because I'm the leader. No, I'm not. But no. So my topic is one that I think is really important, which is specific to when you have a group of creatives and you're bringing together kind of a small team of creatives. I think that you can really leverage everyone's uh, abilities to their maximum potential if you keep in mind one simple axiom, which is best idea wins. And so, what I mean by that is even if you are, for example, the sound and music person on your team, if that person has an idea with regards to gameplay or art, I feel like it's really important to be open to that and listen to that because if you're a small team, like we're just three people, you know, let's say I'm the lead artist. If only the art ideas were able to come from me, then we're like inherently limited by that, right? Because it's basically just whatever my best idea is. And quite frankly, I'm not comfortable with that. Like I think that's kind of not really maximizing your potential because, for example, my brother Brian, he's seen a bunch of amazing movies and he always has really good insight onto that. He has an eye for visuals. He knows things that are effective, that are scary. And so, he's going to have plenty of opinions on that stuff. And we would be missing out on, I think, a lot of the things that make our team strong if we just kind of said, well, you're not the artist, so you don't get to say anything about that. You know what I mean? So kind of always being open to other corners, even if it's not your own department, being willing to offer an idea, I think, is a really, really important tool. And actually, I stole this idea from Pixar Studios in Emeryville, California. They make little independent movies like Toy Story and Monsters Inc. You may have heard of them, but they're kind of famous for this best idea wins mentality, where no matter what your position in the studio is, if you have a good idea and if that's the best idea, that's the one that you want to implement in your game. So I think especially with small team, it can be a really good way to keep everyone involved and engaged. I'm curious what you guys think about that, how that's played out for us.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think, like you said, and I'm amazed Pixar can do this because it's a much bigger team, but they can, from what I understand. And I think one of the advantages of being a smaller team is you don't get lost in a cacophony of ideas because there's only three of us. So it's very conducive to, like, if somebody has an idea, like, there's only three sources where this is going to come from. So in some ways, like, I think you can use that as your advantage, right? Like, I think where you have departments where you have very kind of like structured leadership that kind of makes these decisions in terms of design and those kind of things comes from necessity of large teams. So I would encourage you, you guys out there that have your small teams, use that to your advantage, right? You have the chance for everyone to feel like they're, part of designing the game. And I think you're just going to find your team overall is going to be that much more engaged in making the game if they feel like an idea that they have is going to find its way in the game.
I agree. I agree.
Yeah. And just to piggyback off of that, I mean, I think what we've been noticing a lot with our team of 3 is some ideas will start with one person who plants the seed. And then because we don't have that siloed environment, it's very collaborative. We play ping pong, right? We start to build up that idea. Maybe that idea is turned into something else because we are all 3 comfortable and trust each other with opening up with ideas and then also like enhancing some of the ideas that the other person started with, right? So, um, me being kind of the audio guy, not really into the code, I think we can all still bring ideas as the end user, as the player, so we can all share that experience together too. So that's been really cool, and I think speaks to the point that you're making too, Andy.
Yeah. No, I mean, even just this week, like Brian and I were, Peltis, the audio guy, and I were having a discussion about the ghost hunt, and I was really because Pelt's by far the best gamer out of us 3, so we really rely on him for feedback as far as like, hey, like, would a competitive gamer like find this fun or challenging? You know what I mean? Um, and so I was asking him about some of that stuff, and he was kind of saying like, "Oh, well, but what if this is like too hard to code?" And I was like, "Dude, just whatever you want, say what will be fun, and Eric and I will find a way." You know what I mean? And so like, I really encourage like if you're a programmer and you're soliciting feedback from non-programmers, one of their instincts is if they're nice, like my brother Brian is they're going to want to protect you from doing like a bunch of work. But it can be useful to kind of tell them like, hey, look, this is the idea phase, like go nuts, you know what I mean? Like I'll always tell you like, yeah, I don't think we could do that, you know what I mean? But at least in the idea phase, like it's always nice to kind of just go, hey, blue sky, if you could, however you picture this game being the most fun, let us know. So,
And like
yeah.
a quick
Yeah.
concrete, I was just trying to think of a concrete example of what Pell was talking about with the ping pong and stuff. And I think maybe one quick example of that would be like I think having Pelt give ideas as early as he has our game, and we could show some of this in later episodes, but I think our game has a lot of sound effects for the stage that it's in. And I think that's partly because of Pelt being part of the idea generation process early. So let me just give a quick example. So one thing that you'll see in the game is the sound of the player footsteps is different if you're in the house versus you're outside, right? So I think Pelt originally had the idea of like, okay, I want to make a sound effect when you're outside and then when you're in the house, right? And what that caused Andrew and I to do is have to come up with the programming that would handle detecting what service you're on so that it would play the appropriate sound effect. I don't know, Indy, do you want to just run that real
Yeah.
quick
Yeah,
or is
yeah, I
that
can
not?
definitely show that. And the cool thing about
I
that
just thought,
is because we had surface detection in the game, we ended up using that for like other things too. So it was kind of this thing where like we wanted to get that feature in the game in order to have the sound effects uh, be possible, but then it ended up kind of actually allowing us to do other things. So yeah, so right now you can hear that's the sound if you're walking on the grass or running, and then as soon as I get to like a hard surface, you'll hear that it changes. So yeah, and then the third one that's kind of cool, the ghost is trying to kill me, is when you go on the stairs. I should shut up so you can actually hear the sound. Yeah, nice squishy, creaky sounds of going up the staircase. I mean, what's a haunted house without some creaky staircases, right? So yeah, so
Exactly.
that was a huge thing. I feel like that was like a nice little layer of added immersion that we were able to get in the game much earlier than if Eric and I were just, oh, we'll tack some sound effects on at the end kind of thing. I feel like we're very fortunate to have sound and music be such a like a foundational part of our games, early on. So
Yep. Yep. Definitely.
Absolutely.
now, Pelt, I want to know what your topic is for this evening as far as what you feel like other small teams could learn from our experiences.
100%. So the thing I wanted to talk about was if you have an opportunity to get a prototype of the game, regardless of how bare bones or skeleton it is, even in the early stages, that can be incredibly helpful if you're the audio guy or gal and trying to figure out how you can add the most value to the team from like a music or audio standpoint. So like for example, Eric and Andy are working off of the Godot game engine you see in the screen share here for our most recent game, and they gave me the keys to the castle for a sandbox version, so I can go in there and have a complete white space of where I think it would be cool to start to plug in some initial effects, right? So whether it's the footsteps that Eric and I were talking about earlier, what are the differences there? Um, Creaks, right? Just like textures, atmospheres. And I think what I found is once you kind of plant one seed, they really do start to build organically, and you can really get the creative juices going in terms of, okay, here are the basic sounds that we want in this game, but what are some little Easter eggs that we can add to make our game feel a bit more unique? So that's a big one. I would say if you don't have an opportunity to have like a sandbox version of your game, um, you can also, work on like a reference video game that one you really enjoy and you think they nail the sound design, and something that also fits like the genre of game that you're trying to build out. Then go into that game and be really attuned to what are all the different sounds that you're hearing. Where are they coming from? How loud are they? Um, any little thing, and start to jot those down, right? So that way, you know, you're going into the game and you have an idea of, hey, here are some things that I want to start to incorporate as part of the sound. So I would definitely say if you are fortunate enough, like myself, to have two awesome older bros who are willing to share a sound box of the game, that's a huge plus. I know it can be maybe a little bit intimidating, like as the audio guy or gal getting into a game engine and you're going, I don't know a single lick of code. Um, that's totally fine because you can just act as the player, right? Whatever version that they've built out, and just focus on what is the experience like as the end user, as the player, and really start to build some of those pieces out. Um, I'll give you one example related to the footsteps that were brought up earlier. Was Andy and Eric designed a really cool effect where with the flashlight, there's a small percentage where it'll have a little flicker effect, right? So we thought that was so cool. And from an audio perspective, I wanted to see like how can we make that effect, stand out a bit, right? Like how can I kind of match something unique on the audio side to this great little Easter egg that Andy and Eric developed, right? So you kind of have an opportunity to see what that's like, play as the end user, and then see how you can enhance that with some different sounds that you're bringing in. So that would be, one thing I thought would be really helpful if you're trying to figure out, hey, coming into the game, like where can I start to get some creative ideas going, and also collaborating and working with your team. But yeah, Andy and Eric, I'm curious what thoughts you have on that.
Oh
If there's
yeah,
anything you want to add to that piece.
totally. I mean, actually, that anecdote you brought up is a really good one because it's definitely, I think, one of the most organic instances of kind of where the collaborative process can spawn something. Because like I originally threw that in as like a very last minute kind of just like almost like not even really taking it seriously kind of thing, you know? But then you picked up on it. And then I remember the sound effect that you sent back was like really intense, and it like was really scary, you know. And so that made me think like, oh wow, like we can actually use this to like have a pretty effective scare, you know what I mean? And so
Yeah.
then that led me to kind of go, okay, well, like I want to use this as a scare, but I don't want the players to shit their pants when they turn the flashlight on in the van
Yeah.
right at the start of the game. So then that kind of caused me to create. Actually, I can show that. There's this big box around the mansion. It might be a little hard to see, but this big box here. And so basically, if you're inside that box, then you can trigger that special uh, flashlight jump scare. And if you're not in the box, then you can't. And the logic there is that when you're inside the mansion, the ghost is messing with you and your electronics and things like that. But the funny thing about that is that having that system in place, being able to detect if the player is inside the mansion or outside the mansion, has been huge for other systems. There's so many other things in the game that depend on that now, you know? And that all started from like a very, very, very organic thing. So I think that's like a really good example of, you know, where you're just like you're willing to go with the idea that the other team members bring forward, and kind of push it forward as far as you can. I think that's like a really great example of how we were able to do that, and you know, by being open to, you know, opportunities no matter where they come from. I think that's one of the strengths of our little three-man studio. So yeah.
Yeah.
Um, Eric, do you want to tell us about something that you learned from all this hard work that we've done?
Sure. Yeah. And if you guys, like these videos about, especially, collaborating on small teams and stuff, feel free to let us know. We'll make more of them. We thought it'd be fun for like each of us just to have kind of one main topic that we talk about, but we could do this as a regular thing, if that's something that you guys are interested in. So for my working on a team topic this week, I'm focusing on it's kind of connected to kind of what Pelt's talking about maybe going outside your comfort zone. If you're like an audio person, get that prototype, get in the game engine. Again, it can be a little overwhelming at first, but because you have this small team, I think just the more parts of the game that you can touch and work on, just the more ideas that you're going to bring to the overall development. So I started off, 2 years ago, learning the programming side of game development, and that was what I was primarily focused on. And I had done that for me like the first like 6 or 8 months. But it sort of got to the point, especially when we were starting to develop this game, Peltophobia, it's going to be, it's 3D. It's got a lot of visuals. My brother Andrew has a lot of background in 3D creation and softwares, but it's just like he's also doing a ton of the programming as well. So it'd just be a too mammoth of a task to have ask him to be responsible for all the programming that he does and all the assets. So I also do programming, but what I realized, and this is my takeaway here is, don't be afraid to step outside your comfort zone, develop skills that maybe you don't see as like your specialty necessarily, but might be necessary. So Tim Kaine, if anybody's familiar with him, he's got a wonderful YouTube series where he talks about different games that he worked on, and he was one of the main guy, I think, behind Fallout, and he talks about sort of what he calls the decline of generalists. Anyways, you can check out that video if you want. I highly recommend it.
Yeah, we could put a
But
link to
basically,
it. We
what it
could put
comes
a link
down
to
to,
it in the description.
yeah,
So yeah, you
that's a
can
good
check that
idea.
out. We'll be sure to do that.
Yeah,
I'll make a note.
definitely.
Yeah.
Yep, absolutely. I recommend a lot of his videos, by the way. Really interesting guy with tons of experience. So I really like listening to what he has to say. But one thing that stood out to me in his video about decline of generalists is just how, and again, this is more like large studios, right? Many large studios, it's like for example, even let's say like Pelt as the sound guy and as the music guy, very few large studios would have somebody doing both of that, right? Like they'd have a dedicated sound guy. Not only that, but like dedicated sound for this specific part of the game,
Yeah,
right?
I
And then you
mean,
have
even as
somebody,
specific as like you do the UI sound effects, right? You do like
yeah,
the in-game sound effects, you know. Pelt does everything for us, you know. So
yeah. And in some sense, like it's necessary in large studios because like, you know, I mean, we were spending millions and millions of dollars on a game like the AAA studios. Like the player expects a certain amount of quality on every minute aspect of the game, right? But the thing is, when you're indie, like you can't afford to have somebody focus only on the UI, right? Like, and in my opinion, Pelt brings the AAA quality to his sound design. Um, so,
Yeah, our sound design is
but
very good for an indie studio, I will say.
yeah, yeah, I'll say I think
I
it's our biggest
appreciate it,
strength.
guys.
But yeah, but the thing is like he can't afford like Pope can't be the UI sound design guy, right? Like he has to do it all for us, right? And that includes his musical scores and stuff and that sort of thing as well. So yeah, it's just kind of like I think when you're working on a small team, yes, there's certain aspects of the project that you might see yourself as the specialist, but don't be afraid to go outside that. So for me, it meant I got to learn to do some 3D modeling. Like I got to help create some assets, right? And believe it or not, there's a number of things that you're looking at right now that I created. Now, I did like a Udemy course. I would really recommend Blender from Game Dev TV, Grant Abbott. He has a really wonderful course, um, but it required me to kind of go through that course, spend the time, work on developing the fundamentals of 3D modeling, and being a high school teacher, I'm just so into like the idea of learning and self-learning and developing skills, right? So what I would say is like if you're in a small team, you've got to be willing to, I think, develop skills outside of your comfort zone. For me, that's 3D modeling. And like so this scene here, like the candle, Andrew did, and I would not know how to make that kind of like wax type shape. But here, the chairs, dining table, candle holder, spoon, fork, plate. I was able to do that. I'm not trying to say, oh wow, look at this, it's amazing. It's not. I know it's
These are your doors
crap,
also.
but the point is, it's passable for an indie game title. Yeah, I all the doors. So there's like certain basic things that are going to go in the game, and if I can do those things, it's going to free up Andrew's bandwidth to do um, assets that are going to require more experience and skill, right? Because he's developed, years of experience on it, right? And I can't replace that. Um, you know, like
But
you have to kind of like
Yeah.
leverage your resources, right?
and I
So I don't have the time to spend years developing the same expertise.
well,
But yeah, I think you were going to
I'll say,
explain
and
anything.
I'll wrap this up. I'll let you guys go, but I will say that actually, I will say that because I know early on, like I had to really encourage you, be like, yeah, go for that object, like let's see what you got, kind of thing, and actually, what I realized is, being I spent some time in the industry as a 3D animator and did some modeling and things like that. And sometimes I lost track of just how effective like just simple shapes and silhouettes can be. Something that we spent a lot of time on in like art school and stuff, like talking about that stuff. But the funny thing is, and this is not a shot to Eric, but because he was learning, like he kind of had to stick to like very simple shapes. And but when we got them in the game with the lighting and everything, like I was really like, wow, like that does the trick. Like I'm reasonably creeped out by that. And so it actually kind of made me realize like, oh, holy crap, like let's adopt like a more low poly style and just, let the silhouettes kind of do more of the talking, and it doesn't need to be as complicated. And by taking that approach, we've been able to kind of generate more models faster. So, it's kind of like a nice kind of back and forth where I think not only have I taught Eric about 3D modeling, but he's also kind of taught me about the power of, going back to kind of maybe like a more, you know, um, I'm trying to say this without sounding like a jerk. A more,
No, no, it's okay. I embrace it.
a
I
more,
embrace it.
I'm
My
gonna say this in the
simple
best way
Neanderthal model.
possible. This is nothing but a compliment, but a more like primitive, simplistic style actually works really, really well in
Yes.
video games. I mean, think about like, all those like awesome like gross horror games back on like the PlayStation 1, right? Where like everything was just like a little bit like screwed up, And like that actually makes you feel like, oh shoot, like something's wrong. And I love the way that our game looks. Like no other game looks like this. Like our game is so weird looking, and like I love it. I love the fact that it looks the way that it does. So the point is that, you know, sometimes it's about kind of getting out of your own way, abandoning your ego, and just rolling up your sleeves and making some stuff. Even if you don't think it's gonna be good, I guarantee you, like your artist on your team is gonna be like, dude, thank you so much for the help. Like I was drowning. You know what I mean? So that's that's what I'll say about that. Eric, you want to say anything to wrap
Yeah.
up that, or
No, no, that's perfect. That's a great conclusion of it. So, I mean, to wrap up, basically, I think our three takeaways that we would encourage you guys that are out there with your small teams, or even as a solo, but you're like trying to, here's the thing. I know there's a lot of you guys out there that are solo game devs. I've seen different polls on different channels, and people ask like, "You work on a small team? Are you solo?" And the vast majority of the time, it's like 80% or higher is solo, right? But I think part of that can be like if you know how to work with a small team, or maybe you have some experience working with a small team. You're like, if you do want to work on a team, right? I know some of you guys you want to be solo, and that's awesome. We definitely going to have stuff for you as well. But given that our studio is a small team, we also I think if you're a solo dev and you want to try and develop a small team to work with, maybe some of these things will give you a chance to get a chance to collaborate with people. Because I can tell you right now that more people are going to want to go with people that are willing to go with best idea wins. Um, your audio guy, if you get them up to speed on how to run the game in your prototype, they're going to be more excited about developing the audio for it. If
Hmm.
you have somebody on your team that's thinking about developing 3D model, but you tell them, oh, you know what? Sorry, it's not really your specialty. It's mine. Let me take care of that. I'm telling you, those kind of actions, they're not conducive to developing small teams, right? So what we hope to do with you guys is one, if you're in a small team, these are the things that we found effective. Two, if you are out there as a solo game dev and you're looking to build a small team, these are kind of our suggestions for you as you're approaching that. And because we want all you guys out there to have as much fun as we have been having working on this game together as a small team. So I think that's how we'll close it out.
yeah, well stated, Eric. Well, I want to thank you guys again for joining me, and I'm sure we'll have the guys back in another episode. Um, but yeah, till next time. Thanks for watching, and stay tuned for more news from Olive Hill Studios.
Happy deving.
Sweet. Happy deving.